Hello everyone, and welcome to CFT Virtual Campus. My name is Alessandro Di Rullo, and I'm the Director for Academia and Entrepreneurship at CFT. CFT, for those who don't know, is the largest education platform on finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. We are proud to have a network of and a community of 70,000, more than 70,000 learners from all around the world, and we ourselves are based in London, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and also Hong Kong. Today, in this Fintech Wednesday session, we have the pleasure of having Lilian Poilpot. He will be discussing what profiles are Fintech companies hiring today, which I'm sure is a question many of you are asking. I'm not sure if maybe you're looking for a new job, maybe you're looking to being promoted, maybe you're just wondering what's going to happen to the world these days and what professionals can expect, and on the other side, how we can size the new opportunities in finance and above. Lilian is really the perfect person to discuss this. He's a senior partner at Erevena, and he has more than 20 years of experience in executive search internationally. He doesn't focus just on finance, but he really has a great expertise in different industries and all over the world. As I was saying, today he will really walk us through what, in his view, is happening in the world, how you can really identify the new opportunities, what is the reality of recruiting, and also some good insights on what you can do if you're looking to be promoted, and what are the steps that you should take. My job is completed, so Lilian, I'd like to welcome you on stage for your presentation, and really looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much for being here with us today.
Hey, good afternoon, Alessandro, and thank you very much for welcoming me into this a great opportunity to discuss with a very diversified and international crowd. I can see from the general chat people joining from all over the world. So thank you very much. Hiring into fintech today is a very interesting and also challenging because of the situation. So what I'd love to do is, of course, trying to answer as much as question as we could during this interaction. The COVID crisis, obviously, which followed the Brexit crisis or the Brexit situation, is obviously an unexpected and very unprecedented crisis. And therefore, for us as recruiter, the first thing what happened was most of the work we were doing were stopped and were put on hold. So I would like to start with a situation of the market, which was a little bit complicated for the last couple of years in weeks in lockdown, but of course in the last couple of weeks now, last 2 weeks, things are picking up again, where people are still raising money, new funds have been announced, and whilst there is some adjustment, because of course investors have put a lot of pressure on their portfolio company, and especially in startups, and also large corporates are reassuring their budget. A period of hold in terms of hiring was a very important one in the period. So Erevena is, as you understood, an executive search. So we advise primarily, very disruptive fintech, B2C and B2B. But at the other side of the spectrum, we work with very large corporates to help them to become more digital. And like, CFT DNA is around retraining, rescaling, upscaling people. It's all about supporting our clients, especially when they are traditional financial services, insurance company, to really embrace the modernity and the new technology. Obviously, the market is currently complicated, and you have all read articles saying that up to 22% of jobs are at risk in fintech in the UK and all over the world. You have heard that companies have potentially layoff. But I'd like this talk to be quite positive on the mid to long-term outcome, because we strongly believe that the fintech revolution, both on the consumer and also on the B2B side and aspect, is going to transform massively the way we operate. And we all have massive example of things who have accelerated throughout the COVID crisis. When I was preparing this with Maria, we were talking Spain, where people were queuing to get access to their money, the pension money, when the lockdown was upon everybody, and they had to have people who were over 65, waiting in the streets for hours, where they were the most vulnerable people. So I think digital usage and transformation through the technology is going to stay for a long period of time. And that's why we believe also expectation from the consumer, whatever their generation, whatever they're coming from, are going to be massively impacting the acceleration of the transformation. Therefore, the requirements also to hiring new talent. I know a fair amount of people in that community today are coming from, established financial services, are rethinking about their career path for the futures, and I would be welcoming any kind of question. So Maria, you have to tell me how the questions are going to interact during this conversation, because I see a lot of things happening on the but we definitely are committed and confident for the future, because last year, again, $5 billion were invested in startup, and therefore those technology-led company needs people for the long term. And we are seeing a lot of demands today also in the technology aspect of it, and the people who mastered AI understanding, security, data, and we will discuss that into details across the next couple of minutes. Maria, is there any question at this stage, to be sure I'm not just monopolizing and you?
Lilian, let me help you. So we can do two ways. Actually, I can see that there are already quite a few questions. If you want, we can start from some of the questions. I'm happy to moderate, or you can continue with your presentation and then we take questions at the end. How would you prefer?
I think some question could help also to trigger the debate and stimulate the conversation, if you agree with that.
Absolutely. No, I love very interactive conversations, so absolutely. So let me have a look. Okay, there is a question: are fintechs keen on hiring talent with new market creation skill set and experience? And I think this is very much around people that have an experience in expanding to new markets, as we hear that many companies are actively expanding. It's all about expansion these days, it seems, right? So what do you think?
So globally, what we have seen is that people needs to expand. They need to understand local market. They need to be close to the consumer they are driving and they are trying to acquire. Technology allows a much more quicker access on a global scale, and we have seen that from the platform industry, we are really scaling up very, very quickly. But regulation is very specific from every single market. So we know also that people who understand regulation and who are capable to adapt that to the expansion are very in a strong demand at the moment. What happened with the crisis is a lot of searches we were doing and a lot of requirements for a fintech company were primarily really focused on people around product, technology, engineering, because that's the backbone. And if you don't have the right platform, if you don't have the right security for scalability, for expansion, you can't do it. And that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs and investors have wanted to secure over the last couple of weeks. So most of the project we have started were around that kind of stuff. We know also that for the go-to-market function, when you want to open up a new country and you want to expand and you want to have a new leader for this market, and within Erevena, we have one sister company, one of our subsidiary called New Peak Partners, who is really focusing and helping startups and primarily fintechs to be opening countries with the first man on the ground. And they've done that with company like eBury, for example, across numbers of territories. And the things that those clients are requesting today are people who do understand very well the local market, who also have understanding of and connectivity with, as I said, the regulator, but also the key customer or the key partners. And most of the time, they could be traditional financial institution. So there is a great level of opportunity for people who are, in FS, broadly speaking, who wants to have a career into the fintech and want to embrace that. Of course, one of the difficulties, the preconceived idea that entrepreneurs and small businesses can have from people with large background experiences. And as a trusted party, when we advise entrepreneurs and startups, we try to really bring that mix of cultural fit. And of course, for people who are in traditional background in FS, we'd love them to understand that building up their reputation and our ability to be agile, to work in nimble organization. But when you are the first woman and first man on the ground for a startup, you don't have infrastructure. You have to build everything from scratch. So there is an element of being, a little bit entrepreneurial, or at least intrapreneurial, and that's very important. That's important to take the risk, and nobody knows what would be the future of those companies. You have to be convinced that the project has a purpose. You need to be convinced that the technology is bringing a solution, and then you have also to accept the risk element. And that's why that was one parameter who was a little bit blocking from some people coming from traditional financial services background to a much more, venture back or fast growing entrepreneurial startups, because the risk element, and it's interesting because managing the risk when you are a startup today, especially in financial services, is one of the biggest threats you can have with cybersecurity. Again, a couple of skills that are highly in demand right now is people who can work on, modeling risk and predictive risk and stuff like that. So, but a lot of people have done that in financial institutions. So they can, through the help of or upscaling themselves through programs like cfte and many others, but you are certainly one of the leading platforms to do that. It's a great opportunity for those traditional profile, if I may call them like that, to give them a new flavor, to be attractive for entrepreneurs and startups who wants to conquer new territory. We recently worked with a fairly early stage but well-funded company who expand in different countries. And what they wanted to hire when they arrive in their new countries was people who once really understand their market, and they were in the SME lending. And therefore, people who have SME traditional lending background were very interested, but they were only interested with the people who were willing to take some risk, because obviously those guys were not yet known in this country specifically when they opened Germany, for example. So it's an entire mindset that are very in demand right now, and you have to demonstrate that in the way you're promoting yourself from your CVs, from what you're promoting on yourself on LinkedIn and any other social platform that you are using, and when you're interacting with recruiter, because what recruiters preconceived idea would be, okay, if you spend XYZ years with this large financial institution, you might have lost a little bit of, the appetite, the hunger, the sparks that we need as an entrepreneurial-led or founder-led business. And I think that's very, very important when you want to address a career change or a new orientation in your career. I'm not mentioning salary because I'm sure at some stage we will talk about that. I'm just talking about skills that are expected by recruiters at the moment. And you have many opportunities to highlight where you had an impact in your background. And I think when I receive, established traditional financial services profile CVs, they are still built and structured the way and using the word that are fitting perfectly well for another banks. But our clients usually are not banks. They are entrepreneurs who most of the time have no specific ideas of why they were creating something. And then they were an inspiration, and they were, putting everything they have to create a disruptor. And they need to also understand from you as a potential new candidate and new employee of this firm, how can you help in building something with them?
Fantastic. No, that's super interesting, and I see questions keep coming. So we have a lot to discuss about. But actually, before I read the next question, I want to ask from the audience. I want to ask a question myself, which is like, I've been listening very often these days, especially if some people say it's really the time to launch your startup or to join a startup, and some other people said it's maybe the time to actually stay at your company, at your firm, at your bank, and either stay safe, try to keep your job, or do actually go to the extra mile. You mentioned about mindset, you mentioned about the importance to be intrapreneurs. If we need to do the game of, choose one and drop one, which path would you choose?
Look, first of all, we are now, if I look at the period right now, there is less hiring than there were a few months ago. Nobody knows the full impact of the COVID-19, both on the economical crisis who could be upon us in numbers of territories, but also the opportunity that are going to be created post that. And you read, and everybody knows that there were thousands of new companies set up at the brink of the previous financial crisis in 2008, 2010. So real entrepreneurs are going to take the opportunity to disrupt the market or accelerate things. So no doubt we will see, and we are going to see currently, a numbers of people who want to double down. Then in the venture-backed community, you have people who have raised a fair amount of money just before the crisis. And those guys have a lot of pressure from their investor to extend the runway, extend their cash capabilities. So, all investors have said to their portfolio company, if you have planned to raise money in 2021, you have to rebuild your plan to do only fundraising in 2022. Okay, and obviously hiring was the first thing, like advertisement are the two first things that you pause or you stop. Okay, and that was the first week of the COVID-19 crisis. But once we are saying that, you have a numbers of organizations, and I did a podcast recently with an entrepreneur who runs a Contox, which is a startup who raised a fair amount of money at the last quarter of 2019. And those guys were, okay, yeah, we need to be lean, we need to be agile, we need to see productivity, but we are not in the urgency. Okay, so it really depends where you fit. Today, we are talking about fintech. I think fintech is going to see some, issues on consumer, but there is a lot of gap into the pure B2B fintech, where you're seeing a lot of tools and technology who are going to, based on AI, based on data, based on new risk modeling. So they will still, at general in the market, be a lot of opportunity, but it will be really depending. You have seen recently Monzo has announced, but they were not the only one to announce massive layoff. Okay, Uber, Airbnb. What we know is that in that bunch of people laying off, you have a lot of very talented people who are going to be very supported by their previous company to find a new opportunity. So there is a flux of candidates. Before COVID, there were a real war of talent in everything, and there were, some inflation in salary all over the places. Going back to the Brexit conversation, a lot of other ecosystems across the globe have really thrive since the decision of the UK to leave the EU. We have today clients in Portugal, in Eastern Europe, in all over the places, because they have built their own ecosystem. They have recruited and promoted and trained talented technology-led, financial services-led people. And technology is allowing that. So we believe it's not just one dimension. The UK is still on the top of the ecosystem of fintech and will do everything it can to remain the leading fintech hub in the near future. But there will be more opportunity everywhere where you are, in India, because the technology will also offer distributed opportunity. If you are an entrepreneur today and you have a lot of difficulty to recruit a data scientist, for example, tomorrow you don't need to have your data scientists in big city. You can hire people who would be distributed and have a lower cost base every day and a better quality of life. We don't believe everybody will work from home all the time, because I don't think it's sustainable. But we will see a lot of more agility in the model of the way companies are going to work. So is it the right time to launch your own company? Yes, if you are truly an entrepreneur. If you've been a fair amount of time in a traditional established businesses, you might see and you might look within those organizations, where are the pockets of innovation? Because we are betting that even though it's complicated for large organization, and RBS recent discussion about killing Bo, for example, is showing that it's still difficult to foster innovation and digital transformation in large organizations, especially banks. But we believe there is no chance. There is no choice for them to do anything else. So they will still try to find within their team people who wants to be part of the most innovative part of the businesses. So yeah, if you want to do that, you might do it step by step. Maybe join some innovative part of your current business and build up your plan for the future. Or if you are an appetite for more risk, obviously you could look at that. But it's the true entrepreneur will take risk right now.
No, absolutely, totally agree that it's really it's very scaring on one side, but very exciting on the other, business-wise. And we have many questions around essentially what should I do as a professional. And there is a question which is quite key to a certain extent, which is fintech and startups in general are all about experience, right? You can learn stuff, you can do your research, but experience, hands-on experience is a different thing, right? So the actual question is it true that fintechs and startups do prefer people with some experience? And I will add on this, if you don't have hands-on experience, what can you do to make this decision?
It's a great question because it's the chicken and egg question, okay? And it's the same when you want to start to have experience in boards. You need to start at the bottom of the pyramid, where most of the time you are already pretty senior in your own organization. So it's counterintuitive. It takes time. So this transition will not happen over time for people, okay? We believe it takes time. You have a lot of opportunity as an individual to think about what you want to do in your career, okay? It's true that startups and fintechs wants to hire people who have experience. And again, if we come back to Monzo 1 second, the fact that they have hired a very veteran banker recently as a CEO demonstrate that people with financial services legacy could not recycle, but could join the fintech revolution. When you do that, you need to understand what is at stake, okay? And joining a startup company, and we advise a lot of young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who just raised, at the moment we are working with a startup with disrupting the pension industry, raised not a lot of money out of the UK. We just hired 3 guys for them in the US during the lockdown with a very innovative, full digital, A to Z digital hiring process, which very few companies are experienced with. So everybody is discovering the new world, okay? It's maybe too early for some people. It's definitely risky in some way, even though it's very interesting, because that segment in the pension industry needs to be shaken, and it will be. What you should start with is to try to identify where you want to land in the near future, how long it will take you. It's not going to be overnight. So it's true that it's not going to be easy when you have people who have been XYZ years in financial institutions. So you need to build up your profile. You need to build up your reputation. You need to use your close network, people who work with you that know that you are agile, entrepreneurial in a way that you can do things by yourself and you are self-motivated, and you were not just part of a large big team where your contribution was not very easy to highlight. You need to look at everything you've done and try to demonstrate and highlight in your CV everything who brings that element of I had an impact. I did something, I achieved something in a big organization, in a matrix organization where it's difficult to be responsible for something. So start to build that. Include that into your resume, into your profile in LinkedIn. Try to mingle with the ecosystem, join platform, be advising to entrepreneurs or friends of you who have taken the risk because they have the DNA to do that. Just help them to better understand your company as a potential customer, and become an advisor to those guys to really understand what they are really looking for. And that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. For the most senior people, Okay, it's the same. A lot of senior bankers we're talking wants to join the startups. They want to be CFO. But again, you have different archetype of CFO. You have people who needs to put in place the financial activity of a company, and they need to be very hands-on. And when you are a high-level banker, sometimes you don't have that level of granularity or roll-up-the-sleeve attitude. So you need to build your profile. So that's what we are seeing. But we have seen also another, individuals I have been working with is 20 years of experience in financial services, very traditional financial services, and gradually built up. He even invested a little bit of his saving into some startups through schemes or through product, and he get to know the community, and he get to train, to mentor, to support entrepreneurs in numbers of ways, and then he better understand the ecosystem and then became relevant to those guys. He's now the global VP sales of a fast-growing fintech company.
That's very interesting, and exactly this is what we see in reality for example, second-time founders, right? They've done it one time, second time they're more likely to succeed. And like similar when you want to join a startup, if you've done something similar before, you understand the mechanism, mindset, how they work, it really helps a lot. This is also why we launched Extrapreneurship, our program, because we saw that many startups were having problems and many corporates were having problems themselves, and it's really something we are really passionate about in helping our community. Talking about opportunities, we also have a question about the role of strategy and innovation. Maybe I will divide, what do you think about the opportunities in innovation teams in traditional institutions, banks and other institutions? And what do you think about the strategy teams of startups maybe?
So a lot of people are investing, to foster innovation and even partnering. If you were going a couple of years ago in fintech forums, you will see the world was a war between startups and fintech and large corporates. Now you're seeing more collaboration. You're seeing more, integration, because that's the way it will work. When the AXA CEO said to a number of entrepreneurs a couple of 2 years ago on the French Fintech Forum, Paris Fintech Forum, was, look, guys, you do things better than us in customer services, in customer relationship, for example, and we need to work with your technology, your platform, and embedded at that, because we're really bad at that, in fairness. But some other part of the business that you want to tackle, we are better. And don't forget also, we have a massive distribution capability for your product and services. So we are seeing more and more, work together, collaboration. It's still very complicated. Corporates are traditional, behavior that are sometimes putting all the legacy on a small startup, and it's difficult. One of the startups we are working with is an AI platform for banking. Okay, they are already headquartered in Europe, and they are already in China. They are already in multiple territories because they work with banks. They work with some of their banks as partners to help them to go to other banks and other financial institutions. So you're seeing more things like that happening, but everyone has tried different ways, and sometimes you want to join internally the innovation lab of your banks, because you're thinking, well, this is where everything is happening. But of course, there is so much legacy that not really a lot of things are happening. So you need also to have a personal judgment on the capability of the firm to achieve the plan, and also how important it is for your leadership, your investor, your board, to make, and we have a lot of conversation with board at large financial services, and they said the board is absolutely convinced about the necessity to embrace technologies and new way of working. And I think COVID will be an accelerator of that. Okay, it will be an accelerator in the way people are working. So the workspace is going to be massively changed. So we have to get used to do a lot of videos. And we need to relearn a lot of things in management. How do you manage your team if everybody works 70% of the time home, or 70% of the team is distributed into XYZ time zone? So it's a massive challenge. We work with, as we said, we help very large banks in the UK. And when we work with them, it was the iteration number 3. So it was not the first iteration of their ventures initiative. And the third one, they were a little bit more bullish about it, and they were a little bit more committed to it. So, but it's also gradually phasing to it. When it comes to strategy in the fintech, yeah, you have a fair amount of demand of that for people who have been strategy consulting, investment banking, and it's a very traditional pattern for a lot of startups to recruit those person as strategy and strategic business development because they also understand very well the financial services industry.
Fantastic. That's very interesting. And what do you think? You mentioned before about marketing spending of startups, and I think also so therefore related to the jobs and to the opportunities in that field. Do you think that is about to, especially these days, do you think that is about to stop? Do you think it's too close to an end, or like you will see a dramatic decrease, or not necessarily? And as you said, it also depends on the type of startup.
I think everybody is going to very specifically watch every KPIs in the businesses. So the cost of acquisition of customers, the retention, the churn, everything like that is under scrutiny big time. So obviously spending is not a great word at the moment, any kind of spending, okay? And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, the trend we have seen during the COVID were really around product, especially for early stage, VC-backed startup, because they need to get their product and services very, very right from day one to penetrate almost organically communities that they want to acquire as customers. So product, engineering, people around cybersecurity, around risk function are in big demand at every single level, but you have a little bit less friction than before, but CTOs, for example, and I know they are more senior potentially or more experienced, but CTOs, VPs engineering, chief product officer, with that understanding of the customer and the agility and the flexibility and the technology mindset and the AI, so everything which is more analytical and data driven is very, very still in demand. And those candidates have multiple opportunity. Where it's a little bit more complicated right now is that if you are in a marketing team, so we were saying that the customer relation, marketing function are more in tension right now. And prior to the COVID, there were a huge demand for hiring those people. So it's true that for those commercial go-to-market function, we have less demand than we used to have before. But we gradually think it could come back. Again, a lot of startups were in, trying to make the cut. The people who have raised more money are going to aggressively take the opportunity to also attract best talent. There will be a consolidation. There is consolidation in the fintech industry. That we are doing more and more to the new generation, the Generation Z, the millennials, and those community wants things differently. There is a great article today on the cfte about the banking industry for those guys, because they don't want things that we were wanted. So again, plenty of opportunity to grow businesses at the moment. If you are in the tech, product, engineering, and security, data, AI, you definitely have more opportunity, even though there is more people on the market. So you need also to muscle your game in every interaction you have with recruiter, your exposition to the network, the social network, to be sure that people can see you, can find you. And again, it always comes back to the way you presenting yourself from what you have done previously.
We have quite a few questions about how do I get into fintech, and mainly from very different background. But maybe what I would like to ask you first is, if I'm from a more technological background or from a non-finance background, what would you recommend?
Again, it depends on if you have done work with data, data, as long as you have done it in a regulated environment, and of course it's an important one, but there is transfer. You can move from one industry to the other, and we are seeing, people are creative, people are doing obviously, in crisis mode, it's always easier to recruit a safe pair of hands. So what are you doing? You're doing somebody who has done the job before, because you're not taking some risk. And at the moment, this is what we are very specifically at this time seeing. There is a spontaneous behavior from every recruiter to go back to basis and go back to people who have a safe pair of hands. So transitioning from another industry is always more complicated. But in recruitment, there is some rules. If you're changing location, you can't change the industry, or you can change the title or the role you were having. So those rules still usually are more flexible when the market is growing 40%, year on year or months on months. When the market is under crisis, and we can consider ourselves today being in a crisis mode, I would definitely say that there will be a tendency to go back to basis. Okay, so obviously, if you are an outsider, you really need to deep dive into your own background to see where are the transferability, where are the bridges, and work with the recruiter that are working with you to help you to build that when you are interacting with the client, the recruiter, the company itself. Okay, and that's very, very important. But again, we know that because of the massive transformation of the organization, every big organization have no choice to embrace it quicker and faster. They will be merging and acquisition. There will be acquisition. There will be a lot of things. So whether you are today in a large enterprise company and you want to move, there is plenty of way to prepare that, but it will not be overnight for sure. And as we said, and it will be certainly more in demand if you are in the technology product, as we said before, rather in the go-to-market function.
That is very interesting. And actually, now the question I see with more votes is about your company. Dan would like, and actually many more people would like to know about the areas of fintech that you focus on, and maybe why is that a focus?
Yeah, so we're a 18 years old executive search firm in tech. Our co-founder they were not happy with the software they were running searches, so they built up a software that was VC back and then was sold to a VC, another venture capitalist firm 2 years ago. So we have this entrepreneurial background. We believe by working with disruptors and early stage businesses, we have a good lens of where the industries are going. And obviously, the firm decided 6 to 7 years ago to look at what was at the beginning of the fintech, and it was not even called fintech at that time. Okay, we strategically work with a early stage fund called Antemis, and we had the opportunity to really understand from early on, new concept, robo advisory, and numbers of things that Antemis was investing in. So, and we believe at that time that it was a big trend. And it would take time, but it was interesting. So fintech is a big third of our activity. SaaS and software is the backbone of our DNA. We are a global firm. The thing we have is that we have offices in San Francisco. We are headquartered in London. So we have seen, the pattern. We have seen what good looks like in other territories, what investor wanted in Silicon Valley when Silicon Valley was at the top. And I know a lot of people are questioning the fact that maybe Silicon Valley is not anymore the number one. And we will see a lot of challenge to that. London has been obviously taking the leading place in fintech revolution. So we were at the heart for numbers of years, but now we have clients in France, as I said, in Eastern Europe, in Asia Pac. We're just helping a fantastic early stage disruptor in the payment industry to gaming and through platforms. So we started with B2C, obviously consumer fintech, but we have more and more built up capabilities. We are 11 partners, so we have people who are very good at B2B, and they work with very traditional, legacy and fast-growing B2B, reinventing the investment banking, the corporate investment banking, the pension, the insurance world. So yeah, we are across the board, but we are more, because we're a boutique, we're dedicated obviously more the C-suite, the leadership of this company. That's why we have created a new PIC partner with a fantastic supplement of our capability, because they are helping also early stage businesses to acquired first-line manager, first man, first woman on the ground in countries and in territories. We have, and that's a very complementary offering to our clients. And at the other side of the spectrum, and what is validating our point of view, is that we do a lot of work with large financial institutions, banks, insurance, who are really interested in bringing new type of people in their organization. So not people who will understand the way Society Generale or Standard Charter is doing banking for the last 20 years, but forward-thinking leaders who can bring them to the legacy of where they are to the next stage. And that's why I think it's a very interesting, and throughout the journey, we do a lot of work with private equity, financial services asset, who are also very interesting asset to look at, because when you have a private equity investor, and especially in the payment space, where you have seen a lot of transaction from the WorldPay, from Net in the Scandinavian market, all over the places, those guys have a very clear agenda. They want to create an exit, they create enterprise value for the next 5 to 7 years and have an exit. So when they're hiring talent people, they have a very good time frame on how we get to there to make things happening. So if you like pace, if you like momentum, if you want to work under a very, I would call it, pressured environment, private equity assets are very also interesting, because they are slightly less risky. At the moment, we are advising a fantastic one who is offering the banking as a service platform for a numbers of fintech prima companies, very well known to everybody on that things. And those guys are private equity. We help them to restructure their leadership team, and they are thriving, they are growing, and they are anticipating the market in the future to be even more important, because people are going to use more and more digital banks, whether you're a consumer or whether you are an SMB.
Fantastic. Lilian, thank you very much.